Alright, I just got over here at Nate's house. I'm getting things set up so I can start welding in the transmission tunnel on that. It's just steel. I'm going to be TIG welding it with an Everlast 200. Borrowed it from a friend of mine. I used to have an Everlast 250 years ago. Great little machines if you're in the market for a welder. Way more affordable than like a Miller or a Lincoln. They weld really good. And they're also inverter welders, so you're pulling less amperage out of the wall, so it's better for if you're welding at home. Alright, so under here, my game plan, which it may change, but since the dash is up here, probably just gonna stitch weld around here, not all the way around, but maybe a little like 1-inch welds, like maybe one here, one here, one here. Depends. I'm gonna see how well I can get to it from inside the car, if I could weld in the spot holes, or in where the spot welds were. But if not, then I'm gonna have to do that. But from inside the car, I'm pretty much just gonna weld where the holes were, and that should be good. Then we'll seam seal it, as you know, it used to be seam sealed, and then just spray it with undercoating, and just paint the inside, the weld, so it doesn't rust. But hopefully it's pretty straightforward. It's starting to get dark here, so I'll probably have to bring out the spotlight, and you know, just it'll kind of suck to do because it's all cramped up. Since we have this up on jack stands. So I borrowed my friend's TIG welder. It's an Everlast 200. It can do AC DC, so it can do aluminum and steel. Pretty good little unit, air cooled. It's got this little tank. So what's cool about this welder is it's 220, but it could also run on 110. So I made this little adapter to 110. This way's over here at Nate's house. I can just do all the sheet metal welding, then any of the aluminum, I'll just bring the welder to my house and weld it there on 220. So I've got the TIG torch, and instead of using a pedal, I've got a little push button. This is one of the bigger handles. It's air cooled. One of the smaller TIG torches would be a water cooled one, which is what I'm used to from back when I used to weld. But I just messed around with the heat to figure out roughly, you know, what temperature it needs to be at and whatnot, so it's not burning holes. But unfortunately, the digital display on this welder, some of the numbers are burnt out, so it's hard to tell what it's at. So I've just been kind of spinning it around, and I think I got it pretty well dialed in where I can go ahead and start welding. So I'm going to go ahead and start prepping the area. I'm going to go ahead and grind off all the paint in the areas that I'm going to be welding, which are going to be the holes that are left from drilling out the spot welds. So it's kind of a tedious process, but I'm going to do that, which will make it a lot easier to weld. And I'm just going to try and weld this thing up real quick because it's starting to get dark out, and hopefully it doesn't take too long. Alright, so I went ahead and got the new trany tunnel just kind of set up in place. It's actually sitting in there on its own. And these two bolts are lined up, which are for the handbrake. So what's cool, if you're doing this on a right-hand drive car, is it's also got them on the other side. So you could use the same trany tunnel, which I'll put the part number down in the description below if you're going to end up doing this conversion. But as I'm looking at this, I mean, I could almost weld in here if I wanted to as well. But honestly, just the spots that had the spot welds, I'm sure will be sufficient. This is really all this is doing is keeping this shifter boot in place. I don't really see that in the handbrake, so it's got to be pretty strong, but I think as long as we just do the same spot welds, it'll not be a problem. The more I'm looking at this, I might actually be able to move some of these wires around and be able to weld in there, because there's quite a bit of room now that all the stuff is out of there. So we'll see how that goes, but I'll go ahead and show you what it looks like underneath. Here we are underneath the car. Seems to fit in there pretty well. Pretty happy with that. So we'll go ahead and probably start welding this up. There's actually a little rubber piece that goes in here that I pulled out thinking that there was a hole up there and I'd be able to put it back in afterwards, as I didn't want it to melt, but looks like there isn't, so I'm gonna have to put that back in, so I might have to pull this back out to do that. But I don't know, I might not grind everything down, I might just go ahead and weld it. Should be alright. If it becomes too problematic, then I'll grind it all down, but I just have a feeling it'll take too much time and it's starting to get dark. Plus, you know, I'm not going to be able to paint the raw metal underneath, and just in case moisture gets in there, I don't really want it to rust. So the less grinding I do is probably the better as far as rust protection. Alright, so I got these 4 spot welds done. As you can see, came out pretty good, even with the rubber right next to it kind of melting into the weld. It still came out pretty good. We'll clean them up and then paint them. With these, I kind of barely just scuffed the surface with the grinder and just welded like right up into the paint, which I've done before in the past with other cars and stuff, and it still works fine. And you know, the heat from the welding kind of melts the paint away. But I've got to go ahead and do the rest of this thing. It's starting to get really dark out now, so I'm probably not going to film it, but I'll get back with you when we got it all welded up. Alright, so a few seconds later for you, a few hours later for me. It's actually the next day. We got this done last night. We welded up all the spot welds, which these 2 bolts are where the handbrake bolt to. Got the top ones there. I was actually able to weld inside of here, but I didn't weld where the spot welds were. I welded kind of where the seam was, just stitched it a little bit, just because there was so much rubber and plastic and everything back in there. I didn't want to be in there too long to burn it up. I didn't grind it or prep it first. I just painted, or not painted, but I just welded with the paint on there. It just made it pop a little bit. Made it a little bit more messy, but still got done just as good. Here on the passenger side, you could see all of them all the way down. I was able to get them all from the inside, so that worked out pretty well actually. I would weld one, and then as the rubber would heat up here, I would scrape it off, then weld the next one, scrape it, weld the next one, and just went all the way down. So it worked out pretty well. And like I said, this piece, you could put the handbrake on either side, so it would work for a left-hand drive or a right-hand drive. So the next step is going to be putting seam sealer on it and then painting over the welds just so that they don't rust. Boy, is it a hot one today in Florida. I think it was like 100 degrees today. I was out cutting trees earlier. It's just scorcher. So you can see underneath here the welds on the back side. In here I couldn't get on the inside to weld these, so I just put a couple tacks, which I think will be sufficient, because I mean, just after welding these front ones and these 4 rear ones, I was pushing up and down on this and it wasn't even moving at all. So I also did like a little stitch here and there, because some of these I couldn't get from the inside just because they weren't all the way through when we drilled it out the first time. And then here, since it's a left-hand drive car, I just tacked it on the bottom, because obviously I'm not going to hook up a handbrake to that side, but you could see the spot welds I was able to weld from the inside. But all in all, I'm pretty happy with the way it turned out. So I'm just going to seam seal it which I got the seam seal from Advanced Auto Parts, and then I'm just going to spray undercoating on it, and should keep it from rusting. Just got done putting the seam sealer on. You can see it in there. I just used a caulk gun and laid it in there and then just smoothed it out with my fingertip. It came out pretty good. In there it's a bit more messy just because of a confined space. I'll go ahead and show you the bottom. Got all this done. It didn't turn out as well. I let it sit a little too long before I started smearing it with my finger. So it kind of came out a little clumpy, but it's still all sealed up. And it's not really going to be visible once the transmission's in. So should be good enough. So I'm going to go ahead and spray undercoating on this in a little bit. Let it harden up a bit more. And then I've got some paint that'll kind of match the interior. I'll spray that on as well. This is a seam sealer I used. It's gray. Picked it up at Advanced Auto Parts. It was like 15 bucks for the tube. And just a cheap little caulk gun that Nathan had. I forgot to bring my nicer one that keeps it from dripping at the end when you're done using it. But yeah, there's probably still half the tube left. So one is definitely plenty for just doing the tranny tunnel conversion. Alright guys, the light visibility is kind of low, but I went ahead and sprayed the undercoating on it. I did 2 coats. Seemed to turn out well. I just used some Advanced Auto Parts, I think was the brand, undercoating. It was like $5. Wasn't too bad. It's kind of got like a texture to it. Came out pretty good. It's got kind of a brownish color, which that it might darken up as it dries, I'm not sure, but overall I think it came out pretty good. I mean, it's somewhat noticeable, but it's not too bad. Well, got the tranny tunnel painted up with some paint from Advanced Auto Parts, which actually happened to match up really well. And here's the other side, all finished up. All in all, I think it turned out pretty good. I think that's going to conclude today's video, guys. I appreciate you guys watching. If you have any questions about the tranny tunnel swap, just comment down below. If you don't mind, please hit the like button. It'll help rank this video higher so more people can see it. So hopefully if they're doing a tranny tunnel swap, it'll help them out in the future. As always, guys, I hope you guys have a good one, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks.